The Honourable Member for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As always, it's a pleasure to rise here in the chamber to speak on behalf of my constituents from Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. This is the second time that I've had to speak to this question of privilege. To be frank, I'm shocked that I would get this opportunity, as I thought after hearing my first speech, the Liberal government would have just seen the errors of their ways and complied with your order, the Speaker's order, and the will of Parliament via a majority vote back in June to turn the documents over. Maybe I'm a little too naive about expecting the government to follow the rules, Madam Speaker. That being said, Madam Speaker, I don't want to have to speak to this a third time, so can you just clarify, do we have quorum?
Yeah, I think we do. Sure.
How many people online?
One and another one and another one. Another one.
Okay, we have quorum. Yes, the Honourable Member for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
Oh, all right. Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, again, hopefully this time with enough members of the government listening, they'll actually finally be willing to comply with the order of your chair. So, last time I got up here, I actually utilized the opportunity to voice a number of the questions or answers that I got from my constituents of Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. So I read off those quotes directly into the record, asking for their feedback really on two questions. Number one, should the Liberal government turn over the SDTC documents to the RCMP for their criminal investigation and comply with the will of Parliament and the ruling of the Speaker? And number two, should the Liberal insiders who are awarded contracts through the SDTC in an illegitimate manner or means repay that money that they received back to taxpayers? I was shocked, Madam Speaker. Within just a few hours, I got over 200 email replies. Within just a few days, over 500. 85%, approximately 85% answered in the affirmative to both those questions, and approximately 10% were unsure. They weren't really maybe tracking the issue, and there was a select few that felt, for whatever reason, that maybe the government shouldn't comply with the will of Parliament. I got to read about 30 of those quotes into the record last month, so I'm going to use the opportunity again in this speech to actually read their words into the record. And again, I've gone through and vetted them because there's a number of them that don't meet the parliamentary language test, but I will try to make sure I don't slip up. But before I get into their responses, I do want to remind everybody watching today and listening to exactly what we're debating today, because we are on to a sub-amendment. So to back up, the question of privilege that we're considering is the motion by the member from Regina Capel that was seconded by the member of Mégantic-Léab that the government's failure of fully providing documents as ordered by the House on June the 10th, back earlier this spring, be hereby referred to the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs, and the amendment, as amended by the member from Mégantic-Léab, again, and seconded by the member from South Shore St. Margaret's, that the motion be amended by adding the following: provided that it be an instruction to the committee that A, that the following witnesses be ordered to appear before the committee separately for 2 hours each. 1, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry. 2, the Clerk of the Privy Council. 3, the Privacy Commissioner of Canada, who respected the order of the House and deposited unredacted documents. 4, Paul McKinnon, the former Deputy Secretary to the Cabinet and Governance. 5, the Auditor General of Canada. 6, the Commissioner of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. 7, the Deputy Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, Canada. 8, the Law Clerk and Parliamentary Counsel of the House of Commons. 9, the Acting President of Sustainable Development Technology Canada. 10, a panel consisting of the Board of Sustainable Development Technology Canada, and B, that it report back to the House no later than the 30th sitting day following the adoption of this order. This again was moved by a sub-amendment, that the amendment be amended by the adding the following: except that the order for the committee to report back to the House within 30 sitting days shall be discharged if the Speaker has sooner laid upon the table a notice from the Law, Kirk and Parliamentary Council confirming that all government institutions have fully complied with the order adopted on June the 10th, 2024 by depositing all their responsive records in an unredacted form. So basically, what does this sub-amendment get to? It's really highlighting, Madam Speaker, the conditions for ending this blockage of Parliament, this really Liberal filibuster, by simply turning over the unredacted documents related to SDTC, or more commonly known to most Canadians as the Liberal Green Slush Fund. While the Liberals have claimed that they've turned over thousands of documents, as it's been reported, and as the Council to the House of Commons here has reported in committee, many of which were redacted, and they have not complied with the order. I noticed that the member from Winnipeg North has given 3 speeches on this question of privilege already, and he's had, I'm pretty sure, over 300 interventions on this topic alone now. He somehow continues to claim that this is a conservative filibuster. In reality, the Liberals have the ability to end this blockage in the House of Commons today if they simply turn over the documents. Members from all officially recognized parties in this House have been speaking on this question of privilege for quite some time now. An aspect that I didn't get in on my first speech, though, Madam Speaker, that I think is important. What was this fund about? It's a fund that's been around for over 20 years. It was given a clean bill of health back, I believe, in 2018 timeframe. No issues. But it was really a fund established to promote research and development, support green technology funds right across Canada. So, good cause, something that I think all members in this chamber, in this House, totally agree on. Unfortunately, this scandal, this mismanagement of $400 million worth of funds by Liberal insiders, with over 186 conflicts of interest, has created a huge problem for a lot of these green technology companies across Canada that aren't part of the scandal, that weren't tied to this insider corruption. Since this announcement, the minister announced that there's a new governance framework for clean tech funding. He did this back in June. That effective immediately, SDTC will also resume funding under a reinforced contribution agreement with ISED for eligible projects in a sector vital to our country's economy and clean growth transition in line with the Auditor General's finding. The minister said his department will enhance oversight and monitoring of the funding during that transition period. Well, here we are, Madam Speaker, 5 months after the fact, after that announcement, and there's still unknowns. I have a green technology company in my own riding, employing approximately 7 employees, 70 people that are working hard to make Canada a global leader in green hydrogen. But where's their money? Money that they were pre-approved to. They're not one of these organizations tied to the corruption and these conflicts of interest. So I guess I'll pre-propose maybe a question that I might get from the member from Winnipeg North. He's normally the one that likes to ask me questions. He'll have time here because my speech still has, I think I got approximately 10 minutes or 11 minutes left, is to go talk to the government, try to get an answer as the spokesperson in this place for the government about when is that money going to start to flow. Because there's, in my riding alone, 70 people dependent upon this flow of money that's supposed to be still going through for the companies that weren't in conflict. And if it's dozens just in my own riding, I guarantee you there's hundreds of Canadians across this great country that are sitting in a status of unknown. What they don't know whether or not they're going to have a job still when that funding that's supposed to be flowing in the new year, whenever it's supposed to be coming, that's been already pre-approved of when they're going to get that funding. So I asked the parliamentary secretary to maybe do some digging into that over the next few minutes, or encourage the minister to come and inform all members that are impacted by this decision, to give them a status update in a timely fashion, because I think it's something that these businesses that are doing phenomenal work to help address green technology across this country. So, Madam Speaker, I'm going to go back to reading some quotes, because there's nothing, I think, there's no bigger privilege that we have in the House of Commons than to be that voice of our constituents here in Ottawa and to put their words on the record. So Jennifer from Lions Head, in response to my questions. The Liberal government should definitely hand over the SDTC documents for investigation. Also, Liberal insiders should have to pay back the grant money they received. I just don't understand how this deceitful government, especially the Prime Minister, gets so many passes on shady deals for the past 8+ years now. Marion, she says, the Liberals should hand over all the documents immediately, and everyone should pay back the money they received illegally, in my opinion. Just another example of the Liberals' incompetency, or worse, dishonesty. Rhoda, she says, yes, the Liberals should be called to account and to submit all documents to the RCMP and to comply with Parliament. Otherwise, their actions indicate they are hiding something. They are not above the law. Yes, those Liberals must be held accountable and should repay the grant money to the taxpayers. Robert, thanks for permitting a taxpayer of Canada to reply. Discouraging and just disappointed in most, if not all, of the Liberal NDP performances as our Canadian federal government that are joint, are very shady, and questionable partners that I do not believe how Canadian best interests first as that don't put Canadian best interests first as their first interest, which they surely should. Linda from Sauble Beach, yes to both your questions. Sounds like watchdogs fell asleep. It'll be hard to get the money back from Sustainability Development Company, social services, hospitals, etc. will also have to take a hit with this lower or nil grants. Theft from the public purse should certainly be investigated. Maybe bribery was involved, and the acceptor could be made to pay back their gifts. Bill from Kemble. The Liberal government must obey the wishes of Parliament and deliver the unredacted documents over to the RCMP. Failure to do so should invoke charges of obstruction of justice against the Prime Minister and his minions. All persons or companies that illegitimately obtain funding must be made to pay back with interest all monies received. Additionally, criminal charges relating to fraud should be brought against the CEOs and other top executives. Deborah from Georgian Bluffs. Liberal horse is long out of the barn. As far as I can tell, the Liberals have executed a number of activities that are highly suspect at best, possibly criminal, some by commission and others by omission, and yet they remain in power and have been in no way held accountable. Of course, I think any documents proving wrongdoing should be submitted and monies returned to the public coffers, but do I have faith anything will come of it? No. Elaine. Yes and yes to both your questions. That is cheating, stealing, and secretive. I'm glad there are whistleblowers. There is no confidence, common sense, honesty left with the government in any capacity or at any level. Mark, all SDTC documents should be made available to the RCMP, and any ill-gotten funds should be returned, as well as criminal charges being filed where applicable to whoever is involved. The bleeding has to stop. Samantha, yes, because if it was anyone else, the same would apply. We as taxpayers should be treated with the respect that this will get looked into and brought to justice. Denise, my answer is yes and yes, but unfortunately I'm sure nothing will be resolved and those who received the money will never pay it back, and nothing will be done to the politicians who gave this money to their friends. It is sad to see so much money go to the rich when there are so many struggling just to make ends meet. Gary, the Liberals should absolutely adhere to the will of Parliament. Isn't that what democracy is all about? There are too many cover-ups and backroom deals, and this is obviously one that they don't want to be made public, although I don't believe they can hurt themselves any more than they already have. Bill, yes, the Liberal government should definitely turn over the requested documents immediately to the RCMP, and any Liberal insider who was awarded a contract illegitimately through the SDTC should be required to repay the amount. Todd, the Liberal government that ran on being an open and honest should be held accountable for their actions. The money that was given out should be returned in an investigation done by the RCMP. This is probably just the tip of the iceberg. So, Madam Speaker, I think that gets to a key point here, and it's important for everybody to remember. This approximately $400 million of money that was handed out was only a sample set of the billion-dollar slush fund. So, in all likelihood, we're talking about a lot more conflicts of interest and a lot more money that was handed out. But ultimately, out of those additional, I don't know how many comments I just read into the record, what was the key message to us here in this chamber and to the government? They're asking for transparency and accountability. It's our role, it's the role of parliamentarians and Parliament to hold the government to account and to oversee the government spending of Canadians' hard-earned tax dollars. By refusing to comply with the Speaker's decision to produce the documents, the government is undermining the principle and integrity of this House and is setting a very dangerous precedent for what I think Canadians expect from all of us in this House of Commons. Parliament is the House of the people, and the people of my constituency of Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound, and for that matter, all the constituencies across this country who trusted us and elected us to represent them. We are here to be the people's voice in Ottawa and ensure that we are good stewards of every single one of their tax dollars. Canadians, perhaps more than ever, as they struggle with the cost of living crisis and try hard every day just to put food on the table and pay to have a roof over their heads, Canadians deserve to know where those tax dollars are being spent prudently, responsibly, and on programs that will impact their lives in a positive way, not to line Liberal insiders' pockets. In preparing for the intervention today, I did review some of the excellent speeches by my Conservative colleagues, and I appreciated learning something new from my honourable colleague from Foothills when he highlighted some claims that the member of Papineau stated back in 2013, which was before my time and privilege to be in this esteemed chamber. The then leader of the Liberal Party proclaimed that a future Liberal government would be coming out shortly with a way to open up and be more transparent about all expenses in a way that will restore Canadians' confidence and trust in holders of public office. He stated, quote, "We will certainly offer a level of transparency that hasn't been seen before," unquote. A lot of Canadians believed those words, Madam Speaker, and rewarded the member of Papineau in 2015 with the majority government. Unfortunately, when then the Prime Minister said that we will have a level of transparency and accountability like we have never seen before, Canadians, I'm pretty sure, assumed then that this was going to be more transparency and more accountability. And unfortunately, over these last 9 years, we have seen exactly the opposite. As we've seen, this government and this Prime Minister has slammed the door shut on accountability and transparency when it comes to the accountability of Canadian taxpayer dollars. In summary, Madam Speaker, the Liberal government is accountable to Parliament, and Parliament's will is supreme. It's not my Conservative colleagues who are obstructing the business of the House of Commons. It's this Liberal government that is going against the will of the democratically elected House of Commons. The Liberals have the ability to end this blockage in this House of Commons today if they simply hand over the documents. Madam Speaker, we're here to hold the government to account, to be honest, to be transparent, and to make sure the hard-earned dollars, taxpayer dollars of Canadians across this country, in my riding, in your riding, Madam Speaker, in all of our ridings, that money is being spent for the right reasons and in an accountable, transparent manner. Madam Speaker, I look forward to any questions that my colleagues may have, and I'm hoping that the member from Winnipeg North has got an answer for me on my question, that hopefully he can explain how the money is going to flow to those green tech companies that are doing so much to address important issues like climate change across this country and are trying to make a difference, trying to make Canada a global leader. But again, they're being held up because of this Liberal scandal and this mess that's been created. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments, the honourable member for Alex and Louis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We see with this issue that we're setting a precedent in some way. Yes, we know that Parliament is supreme. of course, Parliament makes errors, and it's called to order by the Supreme Court, for example. But Parliament is supreme. But in this particular case, we're setting the precedent that Parliament is using its power to obtain documents to give to a third party. Now, let's forget that it's the RCMP for a moment, but this is a first. This is a first. And it's a very complicated issue because it is a first. And that is why it is a good idea for a committee that represents this House in terms of the proportions of the parties, of the members from different parties that are on the committee. It is a good idea, I would think, that a committee would deliberate on this, because I think a committee could go much deeper than the kind of debate we've seen here in the last 4 weeks. So I don't understand why the member on the one hand has faith in Parliament but doesn't have faith in a body that reflects Parliament and that is within Parliament itself. That is the Procedure and House Affairs Committee.
The honourable member from Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, I have complete faith in our committees, in our process here. I never once said anything in my speech to the contrary. But the issue is, I'm here at the will and privilege of being elected by the people, the great people of Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound. I actually went out and asked them. I asked for their opinion about should the government comply with the will of Parliament. And yes, maybe it's a precedent. Maybe the government should have made that case a little bit clearer if they felt it was a precedent that this House shouldn't take on. That decision was made back in June when we voted on this. We're now here. I've asked my constituents. They've made it crystal clear to me. The government needs to comply with the will of Parliament. I'm here for the people that elected me. That's who we're all here, is to be here for the people that elected us and gave us the privilege to sit in this esteemed chamber.
Questions et commentaires.
The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If we hadn't spent so much money in the SDTC scandal, perhaps the government would have been able to pay for heating in the House of Commons today. Anyway, jokes aside, if the government didn't delegate public funds so much, the issue we have before us today, would it still exist? What could be done so that public money is better spent in a more effective and efficient way without partisanship? What can be done on the matter? Before the honourable member takes the floor to answer, I would like to reassure the honourable member that we are aware of the heating situation and we are addressing it as we speak.
Member from Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think that is, it's a good question, and it's something I did talk about in my first speech a little bit. How do we get into this mess? And I did highlight this fund actually worked really well for 20 years. But where did it go off the rails? When the Liberal minister, then Navdeep Bains, decided to appoint people, the chair of the SDTC, despite being forewarned that there was conflicts of interest by appointing that member. And then ultimately, this is the issues we dug into it, these Liberal government-appointed board members of the SDTC didn't seem to have any ethics, right? 186 conflicts of interest. I think that's the key. So whatever the process was for the 20 years prior, I think we just need to go back to that. We need to be appointing people that are there on merit, that are there because they deserve to be there, that are actually offering programs or, judgment and service to this country for the right reasons, not because they're connected to the government in power.
Questions et commentaires. The honourable member from Edmonton West.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague from Owen Sound for his wonderful speech tonight. In the Public Accounts Committee, where we've been studying this issue, we have the Deputy Secretary to the Cabinet of the Privy Council, which, as we know, is pretty much the Prime Minister's department. She told us that she was refusing to turn over the documents unredacted under an order of Parliament, but she insisted that the Access to Information Law superseded the will of Parliament. In the same meeting, she told committee that she violated the Information Act by destroying documents. So I have to ask my colleague, this is right from the Prime Minister's own department. Do you believe that the Prime Minister's department that believes that the access information law that they violate supersedes the will of Parliament?
The honourable member from Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
Well, I want to thank my colleague for the incredible hard work he's been doing. I know he's been at the lead in front of uncovering this scandal for a while now. But I learned something new. I was not aware that we would have the Prime Minister's office basically bring forth and suggest that somehow the access to information is somehow more important than the will of Parliament, because I flat out disagree with that assertion. The will of Parliament's there. Look, I represent a rural riding. I come from a family of modest background, but I mean, I have to defend with my own family members about the sometimes there is legitimate reasons, especially with my background in national security, that there are certain things that sometimes that need to be protected. But when it comes to corruption, insider information, money, the bad spending of taxpayers' dollars, that is something that should be transparent, and especially when it's brought forward like it has. And ultimately, these documents do, in my opinion, need to be turned over. The will of Parliament must be upheld.
Questions et commentaires, questions and comments. The honourable member, hopefully we'll have enough time for 2 more questions. The honourable parliamentary secretary, leader of the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's important that the member in address...
Actually, you'll forgive the honourable member from Edmonton-Greensboro. Because of the transition, you're right, I didn't go in the right order, now that I'm realizing that now. But I will assure the honourable member from Edmonton-Greensboro, I will assure the honourable member from Edmonton-Greensboro will have an opportunity to ask a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's really important that we take a look at the actual motion that we're debating. The motion is that we send the issue to Procedures and House Affairs Committee. That's what we're actually voting on. The issue in which over 100 and whatever number of speeches delivered by Conservatives tends to want to deal with telling the government that we should not listen to what the RCMP, the Auditor General of Canada, are recommending to the government. So we should stick to the motion which says have the issue go before Procedures and House Affairs. Does he not support the Speaker's recommendation? That's what this...
I appreciate that. And the honourable member from Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll keep my answer fairly short because I know the member from Griesbach wants to get a quick question in too. So the short answer is I respect the will of Parliament. We'll get to vote on that. I'm going to be voting yes on this motion, but at the same time, as I've told this member, I don't know how many times, I think it's everybody's right to speak. And I just think, no, it would be fair, Mr. Speaker, everybody in this chamber should get to speak as much as that member. And then, I mean, this Parliament would go so much faster if we just all spoke the exact same number of words as the member from Winnipeg North.
The honourable member from Edmonton-Greensboro.
I want to thank my honourable colleague for his speech today. I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for making this opportunity available. Just looking at some of the hypocrisy, I think that is difficult for New Democrats to digest between scandal after scandal of the Liberals, but there's also scandal after scandal with the Conservatives. And I find this to be a difficult issue to try to circle, because all of us should be opposed to corruption. When Mike Duffy did that, did he pay back that money and did he say sorry? And if not, would the member be willing to do that on his behalf?
The honourable member from Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
Look, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know this member's, I think, even newly elected in 2021. I was only 2019. I can't speak to past governments. What I will commit in this chamber, I will hold any government of any political stripe to account on corruption every darn time, and I'll be 100 times harder on a future Conservative government that does anything that's even half as bad as this current Liberal government.